In a quiet corner of rural Pennsylvania there stood an old wooden house that everyone in town feared. People whispered that the house was alive, that its walls moved on their own, and that the shadows inside never stayed still. No one dared to go near it after sunset because those who tried never came back. The last family who lived there vanished one stormy night, leaving every door wide open as if they ran for their lives. One autumn evening, three friends, Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, decided to prove the legends wrong. They wanted fame, they wanted views, they wanted to show the world that the so-called haunted house was nothing more than an abandoned piece of wood. So they brought flashlights, cameras, and walked down the long, cracked road leading to the house. The wind grew heavy around them, almost pushing them back, but they kept walking, determined to show they were not scared. When they reached the front door, they noticed something strange. The house seemed to breathe, slowly rising and falling like a sleeping giant. The wood creaked with every breath echoing through the trees. Jessa whispered that maybe they should turn back, but the boys laughed and stepped inside. The moment they entered, the air changed. It felt thick, choking, almost alive, as if the darkness inside had weight. Their flashlights flickered. Even though the batteries were new, the shadows moved along the walls, stretching long arms that reached for their feet. Marco tried to joke, but his voice shook as he said it was just the wind. But there was no wind inside the house, only silence, a deep silence that hurt their ears. Then they heard it, a long-drawn whisper crawling from the second floor. It sounded like their names, but not spoken by any human voice. Ethan pointed the light at the staircase, and the wood twisted as if reacting to the sound. Something ran upstairs, fast, too fast to be human. Jessa clutched Ethan's arm, saying they needed to leave. But when they turned around, the front door was gone, not closed, not blocked, simply gone, replaced by a solid wall. They were trapped inside the living house. The floor began to pulse like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, louder every second. The walls bent inward as if trying to swallow them. Marco ran to a window, but the glass stretched like liquid, pushing him back, refusing to break. The house did not want them to leave. The whispering turned into voices, dozens, hundreds, chanting words they could not understand. The shadows gathered, forming a tall, twisted figure with no face, only a dark, endless void where eyes should be. The figure raised its long arm and pointed at them. The house roared with a sound like 1,000 screams all at once. The candles on the dusty table lit by themselves, revealing old family portraits, but the faces in the pictures were scratched out, replaced by black smudges that dripped down like ink, slowly forming new faces. Their faces. Ethan, Marco, Jessa, all three of them trapped before they even understood what was happening. The shadow figure moved closer, its shape shifting like smoke, its mouthless face stretching wide as if ready to consume their souls. Jessa screamed, but her voice disappeared, swallowed by the heavy air. Ethan tried to push Marco toward the back door, but it too vanished, turning into more shifting walls, floors, and shadows. The house wanted them, and it was done waiting. The darkness swallowed the three friends, piece by piece. The last thing they saw was the tall, faceless figure, bending down, watching them disappear into the breathing walls of the house. And when the screams finally stopped, the house exhaled softly and became still again, waiting for the next visitor, brave enough or foolish enough to enter. Locals say sometimes at night, the house whispers the names of the ones it has eaten, and if you walk close enough, you might hear new voices calling your name too. For weeks after the disappearance of Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, the town grew more silent than ever. Parents kept their children indoors after sunset, and even the bravest people avoided the road where the house stood. Some said they could hear faint tapping on their windows at night, as if someone was begging to be let inside. Others claimed they saw three figures wandering near the trees, whispering for help, their outlines thin and twisted like shadows burned into the air. A young woman named Lila arrived in town unaware of the stories. She was a traveling photographer, searching for abandoned places to capture for her portfolio. When she asked the local diner owner about interesting locations, the entire room went quiet. Forks stopped moving, hands froze in midair. The owner, a tired man with shaking eyes, told her only one thing: stay away from the old house on the hill. But Lila thought this fear was just small-town superstition, and dangerous curiosity grew inside her. That evening she walked toward the hill, guided only by the silver glow of the moon. The trees creaked around her as if warning her to turn back, but she kept going, her camera hanging around her neck, ready to capture whatever mystery lay ahead. When the house came into view, Lila stopped breathing for a moment. The building looked wrong, its windows pulsing faintly as if something inside was moving. The wood shifted slowly like the ribs of a sleeping creature filled with breath. She stepped onto the porch, and the boards trembled under her. Weight not in the way old wood usually creaks, but as if reacting to her touch, welcoming her. She raised her camera and snapped a picture. The lens fogged instantly, even though the air was warm. She wiped it and took another shot. This time, something appeared in the corner of the screen. 3 blurred faces staring back at her, their eyes hollow, their mouths stretched. In silent screams, Ethan, Marco, and Jessa. She did not know them, but their agony burned through the image. Before Lila could step back, the front door opened by itself, the darkness inside spreading. Ink reaching for her, she felt the air grow cold, pulling her forward, whispering her name, though no one in the town knew her well enough to speak it. The house knew her. The house wanted her. She tried to force her legs to move away, but her body felt heavy, as if invisible. Hands clutched her ankles, dragging her across the floor. Inside, the smell of damp earth and old wood wrapped around her. The walls swayed gently, as if breathing in and out. The floors pulsed beneath her shoes like veins carrying blood. She heard footsteps above her, slow and dragging, as if something long dead was trying to walk. Again, her flashlight flickered weakly, struggling against the living darkness. Suddenly, the stairway groaned, and 3 figures stepped into view, their shapes thin, their heads tilted unnaturally. Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, but not alive. Their eyes were empty pools, their skin stretched tight, and their shadows moved before their bodies did. They raised their hands, pointing at her as the whispering grew louder and louder, filling the house with voices that were not human. Lila stumbled back, but the door slammed shut, dissolving into the wall, leaving no way out. The 3 twisted figures began to descend the stairs, their movements jerky and slow, their mouths opening wide, though no sound came out. The walls leaned inward, the heartbeat of the house growing stronger, as if excited to claim another soul. The darkness wrapped around Lila like cold smoke, trying to pull the breath from her body. She screamed, but the house swallowed the sound, consuming it, as if feeding on her fear. The 3 figures reached the bottom of the stairs, their arms stretching longer than human arms should stretch, their fingers sharpening into shadows that curled toward her. And then the house whispered again, so close, so deep that it shook her bones. You came, you are ours now. The whisper of the house wrapped itself around Lila like a cold hand tightening around her throat. She tried to look away from the 3 twisted figures, but their hollow eyes followed her every movement. She stepped back until her shoulders touched the wall, and the wood beneath her shifted as if it was breathing against her skin, slowly rising and falling like living flesh. Lila raised her camera with shaking hands, hoping the flash might scare them away. She pressed the button, and the bright burst of light filled the room. For a moment, the figures froze, their faces twisting in pain, but instead of disappearing, they grew clearer, sharper, the flash revealing every horrifying detail: their stretched skin, their broken limbs, their cracked mouths that opened too wide to be human. The house groaned with anger, as if the light was hurting. The floor beneath her feet pulsed harder, like a giant heart beating faster and faster, each thump shaking the air around her. The walls bent, closing in little by little, trying to trap her. Lila tried the back door, but when she reached it, the handle melted into the wood, leaving nothing but a smooth surface. The house did not want her to escape. A low moan echoed from upstairs, followed by slow, dragging footsteps. Something else was coming. Something heavier, larger, older than the 3 broken souls approaching her now. The shadows at the top of the staircase, thick and twisting like smoke, forming the shape of something enormous, something watching her from the dark. She felt its presence like icy fingers pressing against the back of her neck. The 3 figures moved closer, their arms stretching, longer shadows dripping from their fingertips. They whispered her name in voices that sounded like cracked glass, scraping across the floor. Lila could not understand how they knew her, but the house knew. Everything the house remembered. Every visitor, every scream, every soul it had swallowed over the years. She saw a narrow hallway to her right and ran the house. Trembled as if angered by her attempt to flee. The hallway twisted, stretching endlessly as if trying to confuse her. The doors along the walls opened by themselves, showing rooms that should not exist, rooms filled with moving shadows, rooms that pulsed like living organs, rooms where unseen things crawled and whispered for her to come inside. Lila kept running until she reached a room at the end. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. The room was empty except for an old mirror standing in the center, its surface covered in dust. She wiped it with her sleeve, expecting to see her reflection, but instead the glass rippled like water and showed a different image. The three missing friends standing behind her, staring at her with hollow eyes, their mouths hanging open as if screaming silently for her to join them. She stepped back, horrified, but the image in the mirror stepped forward, the twisted version of herself reaching through the rippling glass, its hand stretching out like a dark shadow, trying to grab her. The house groaned loudly, the heartbeat shaking. The walls and floor, the mirror began to crack, but instead of breaking outward, it cracked inward, forming a deep black hole, pulling everything toward it like a hungry mouth. Lila felt the force dragging her forward, her feet sliding across the floor, the dark reflection pulling her closer. She tried to scream, but the air felt heavy, thick, wrapping around her voice. Swallowing it, the room shrank, bending toward the mirror as if the entire house wanted to push her inside. The last thing she heard was the whisper of the house growing louder, drowning out everything else. Join us. Lila felt herself sliding toward the wall mirror as the black hole inside it pulled with the strength of a raging storm. Her fingers clawed against the wooden floor, but the wood softened beneath her touch, turning warm and pulsing like skin, shifting and sinking under her hands as if the house itself was alive and pushing her closer to the mirror. The reflection inside the glass stared at her with hollow eyes and a stretched mouth, forming a silent scream that grew wider and wider until it looked like an endless tunnel of darkness. Just as the force grew strong enough to lift her off the ground, the door behind her burst open. The three broken souls, Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, stumbled into the room, their bodies jerking with unnatural movements, their shadows twisting around them like dark tentacles. They reached toward her, not to save her, but to hold her in place, offering her to the mirror as if completing a ritual. Their faces showed no emotion, only the empty obedience of prisoners who served the will of the house. The mirror pulled harder, sucking air from the room. The lights flickered even though there were no lamps, no bulbs, no electricity, only the shifting heartbeat glow of the living walls. Lila felt the air thinning, her lungs burning as she tried to pull in a breath, but the house swallowed everything. Even the air, even her hope, her vision blurred. The reflection reached farther, its hand stretching out of the glass like a living shadow ready to wrap around her throat. Suddenly a sound echoed through the hallway, a deep thundering boom like a giant hand slamming against the roof. The house shuddered violently, the walls convulsing, as if struck by something powerful. The three distorted figures stumbled, the mirror cracked in long, jagged lines, though the black hole inside it kept spinning hungrily. Something was happening, something the house did not expect. Another deafening thud shook the entire structure, dust falling from the ceiling, the floor quaking beneath her. The heartbeat of the house grew uneven and violent, as though terrified for the first time in years. Lila grabbed the moment and pushed herself backward, her feet slipping as the wooden floor rippled like disturbed water. The mirror gave a furious howl, a sound that stabbed into her ears like sharp needles, but she dragged herself away inch by inch. The hallway behind her lit up with an eerie red glow. Pipes in the walls groaned as if under extreme pressure. Then the ceiling cracked and cold air rushed in from above. Lila finally freed herself from the grip of the mirror and crawled into the hall, but the three twisted souls lunged forward, their hands stretching unnaturally as they tried to seize her, their fingers bending in impossible angles, their shadows twisting ahead of them. She ran, though her legs trembled and her chest burned. The house shook again and again with each Violent impact. Something outside was beating against the walls, trying to break in or trying to break the house. Apart the whispers. Inside the structure rose into screams. The floors convulsed, the doors melted into the walls, the staircase. Bent backward like a broken spine, everything, living and dead inside the house, trembled in panic. Lila stumbled into the main hallway just as a massive crack tore across the ceiling, revealing a gaping dark space. Above, the heartbeat of the house faltered, slowing. Like a giant creature dying, the walls shivered violently and a deep roar rolled through the air, a roar filled with rage and fear. Behind her, the three broken souls collapsed to the floor, their heads twitching as if something inside them snapped the shadows around them, recoiling like frightened insects. The house itself was losing control, weakening with every blow from the outside. Lila did not know what was happening, but she knew one thing. This was her only chance to escape. The entire house groaned like a wounded beast as Lila stumbled through the shaking hallway, the red glow flickering wildly around her, the heartbeat of the house now slow and uneven, as if something powerful was crushing it from the outside. She heard another massive impact against the wall, a deep booming strike that sent cracks racing across the floor like black lightning. The house let out a long, trembling howl filled with pain and fury. Lila tried to steady herself, but the floor rose and fell under her feet like the surface of a stormy ocean, pushing her toward the walls that stretched and writhed like giant ribs closing in. She forced herself forward, her hands gripping anything that felt solid, but everything she touched pulsed and shifted, as if alive veins of dark shadows crawling beneath the surface. She reached the front hall where the main door had vanished earlier. Now the wall there shivered, violently forming deep fractures as if something outside was tearing it open. The three twisted souls, Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, crawled after her, dragging themselves across the floor, their limbs bent, their shadows stretching ahead of them like long, black claws, but they were slower. Now weak, the house was losing its grip on them. The red glow made their hollow faces flicker like dying flames, their bodies trembling, as if strings holding them together were snapping. One by one they reached toward her, but their hands passed through the air, barely able to move. Another thunderous crash shook the house, this time louder, closer, the wooden beams above splintered, sending pieces falling all around. Lila, she ducked as a large chunk hit the floor beside her, shaking with energy. The walls groaned, a deep low growl that vibrated in her bones, and then she heard it, a voice, not human, not broken like the trapped souls, but something older and stronger, roaring outside the house as if challenging the creature that lived within. Lila felt a sudden rush of cold wind blasting through a new crack forming in the front wall. The darkness inside the house recoiled from the chill as if burned. She crawled toward the growing gap, even as the house tried to seal itself again, stretching the wood like flesh, pulling. The crack closed, but the force outside slammed against it once more, ripping it wider. The house screamed, its voice high and furious, echoing through every corner. The three souls convulsed, their bodies jerking uncontrollably, the shadows around them twisting. Wildly they looked at Lila, their hollow eyes shaking as if for the first time. Something human flickered deep inside them. They reached toward her as if begging her to run, begging her to escape the place that held them captive for so long. She whispered that she was sorry, even though the house swallowed her voice and twisted it into a low moan. The wall burst open with a violent explosion of splinters, sending dust and debris flying. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and freedom. Lila felt tears in her eyes as she crawled toward the opening, but then the floor beneath her shifted, turning soft, gripping her ankles like sinking mud. The house refused to let her go. The pulsing heartbeat quickened again, desperate, enraged, determined to claim her completely. She kicked wildly, pulling herself forward as the living wood tightened around her legs. She clawed at the ground, dragging herself inch by inch toward the cool air. The house screamed again, sending a shockwave through the hallway, the walls rippling in fury. The three broken souls cried out, their mouths wide but soundless, as their bodies twisted out of control, shadows tearing away from them like smoke. Just when the wood tightened to its strongest grip, the force outside slammed into the house, again with unimaginable Power the impact shook the entire structure like an earthquake, the floor beneath. Lila cracked open the grip on her ankles, loosening for just a moment, breaking the hold of the house. She pushed with all her strength, lunging toward the opening, her body half inside the night, half trapped in the breathing darkness. Behind her, the house roared. In pure rage, shadows lunging at her, stretching like claws, trying to pull her back inside, trying to swallow her before she escaped forever. Lila pulled herself through the shattered opening as the cold night air wrapped around her like a desperate lifeline. Her fingers clawed into the wet soil outside, but the living wood behind her lashed out, stretching like long dark tendrils, trying to drag her back into the breathing nightmare. The house screamed with a sound that shook the ground, a cry of pure rage and hunger, as if losing her meant losing a part of its own twisted soul. Her body slid forward inch by inch, her arms trembling with exhaustion as she fought the pull of the house. The shadows from inside poured through, the cracks spilling across the ground like black liquid, reaching for her as if alive. They wrapped around her legs, cold and heavy, trying to pull her back. Just as she felt them tightening, something else moved in the darkness. Ahead of her, something massive, something ancient, something that had been striking the house over and over until it cracked open. A deep rumbling growl rolled through the night, unlike any human sound. The ground trembled beneath her palms as a towering shape emerged from the fog, tall as a tree, wide as a wall, its outline shifting like smoke and bone, its entire form glowing faintly with a silver blue light. The shadows recoiled from it, shrinking back as if terrified. The creature stepped forward, placing itself between Lila and the house, blocking the shadows with its immense body. For a moment, Lila thought it might be another monster come to finish her, but then she saw its eyes, glowing softly like embers, not filled with malice but with ancient sorrow. The creature let out a low, mournful sound and raised a massive arm, slamming its hand against the peeling front wall of the house. The impact echoed like thunder, ripping more cracks across the twisted structure. The house shrieked in pain, the walls trembling, the heartbeat faltering once again. Lila felt the grip around her ankles weak in the shadows, retreating into the house as if afraid to face the enormous being. She pulled herself farther onto the grass, coughing as cold air rushed into her lungs. Her vision blurred, but she forced herself to look up at the creature towering above her, protecting her with its massive presence. The house responded with another roar, shaking violently as if preparing to unleash its full fury. The three broken souls inside, Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, dragged themselves into the hallway, drawn by the chaos, their hollow eyes staring through the shattered opening, their bodies flickering like dying lights. They reached toward Lila, not with malice but with a desperate longing, like children reaching for a door that would never open. Their mouths moved silently, begging her to save them, even though they knew she could not. The giant creature lifted, both arms glowing brighter, its body pulsing with the same silver-blue light that filled the air. The wind whipped around Lila as if the world itself was watching. The creature struck the house again, this time with both hands slamming into the twisted wood with unimaginable force. The ground cracked under the shock, the house convulsed, the roof caving inward, beams snapping, walls bending as if crushed by invisible weights. The heartbeat of the house went wild, pounding like a drum in chaos, then slowing, then racing, then faltering again. The living wood writhed, the doors dissolved, the windows bulged outward like eyes ready to burst. The shadows inside screamed in thousands of voices as the house tried to heal itself, but the creature did not stop. It roared and slammed again, sending another wave of destruction through the dying structure. Lila watched as the three broken souls trembled, their bodies shaking violently, their shadows peeling away from them like burnt skin. They reached out toward her one last time as cracks spread beneath them, splitting the floor. Their figures flickered until they looked almost human again, almost alive. Then the shadows swallowed them, and the floor collapsed beneath their feet, pulling them into the heart of the collapsing house. Lila screamed, reaching out, but the creature stepped in front of her, shielding her from the falling debris, protecting her as the entire house bent inward like a giant lung collapsing for the final time. The walls curled, the roof broke, the floor sank, leaving nothing but a black pit swirling with dying shadows. The roar of the house faded into a weak trembling, whisper then into silence colder than the night itself. The house that breathed was dying, but something inside the pit was still moving, something not ready to let go. The night fell silent as the last roar of the collapsing house faded into the cold air. Dust floated like pale smoke drifting over the broken remains of the living structure Lila lay on, the ground breathing hard, her chest rising and falling as she stared at the massive creature standing before the pit that once held the heart of the house. The silver blue glow around its body flickered like a dying flame, but its stance remained strong, as if guarding her from whatever still stirred below. The ground trembled, slightly, a weak shudder rising from the pit as if something deep inside refused to die. The creature stepped closer, its heavy footsteps shaking the soil. With each step it leaned forward, peering into the swirling darkness, its glowing eyes narrowing with caution. Lila pushed herself up, ignoring the burning pain in her arms and legs. She crawled to the edge of the pit, though every instinct screamed for her to run far away. The darkness below twisted like a wounded animal, shadows swirling together, forming a giant mass that pulsed with faint red light, the last dying heartbeat of the house. Lila felt cold wind rush from the pit, carrying whispers that curled around her ears, calling her name over and over in voices that sounded like Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, their cries soft, weak, begging her not to leave them behind. The sound filled her chest with guilt and fear. The creature let out a deep rumbling growl as a warning. The shadows recoiled for a moment, then surged upward, forming a tall, distorted shape rising from the pit, a monstrous echo of the house trying to rebuild itself using the last pieces of its living darkness. Long arms of shadow stretched toward Lila, reaching with desperate hunger. The creature roared, slamming its giant hand down, sending a blast of silver blue energy across the pit. The shadows screamed in agony, shrinking back as if burned, but they did not stop. The darkness twisted again, forming sharp tendrils that shot upward, lashing toward both Lila and the giant creature. The creature blocked most of them, but one tendril wrapped around Lila's ankle, cold as death, pulling her toward the pit. She screamed, grabbing the grass, clawing at the dirt as the shadows dragged her forward, her fingers tearing through the soil, the ground beneath her crumbling slowly. The giant creature turned instantly, its glowing eyes burning with fury. It struck the shadow tendril with a massive hand, cracking it like brittle bone. The shadows hissed and recoiled, releasing Lila as she stumbled backward. Falling onto her hands, she looked up at the creature, her voice trembling as she whispered a silent plea for help, even though the house had always swallowed her voice. The night air finally allowed it to escape. The creature stepped between her and the pit, raising both arms, the silver blue light burning brighter than ever. The shadows lunged in a final attempt to escape the dying pit, forming a massive wave of darkness rising like a tidal wall, trying to engulf everything. The creature slammed its hands together, sending a rippling shock of light across the night. The burst hit the wall of shadows, shattering it into thousands of pieces, each piece dissolving into the air like dust, vanishing before they could even touch the ground. The pit shook violently, the last heartbeat of the house collapsing deeper and deeper into the earth. The remaining shadows screamed in fading voices until they sank into silence. The ground sealed itself slowly, leaving only a scar of dark soil marking where the house had once stood and breathed and hunted. The silver blue glow around the creature faded. It lowered its head as if exhausted, ancient sorrow heavy in its posture. Lila felt a strange warmth in her chest as she looked at it, a feeling of gratitude mixed with fear, awe, and confusion. She took a shaky step forward, trying to speak, but her words came out broken and weak. The creature turned its glowing eyes toward her for the first time, truly looking at her. It reached out, not with claws, not with rage, but with a gentle touch, placing one massive hand over its own chest, then pointing at the ground where the house had died, then at her, as if saying it had been waiting for this moment for her, that she had been part of something old, something dangerous, something unfinished. The wind swept through the trees, whispering through the night as the creature slowly stepped back, its body fading, like mist breaking apart into glowing particles drifting upward into the sky until nothing remained but the memory of its presence Lila stood alone in the cold night, her heart pounding as she stared at the dark scar on the ground, and she whispered softly even, though she did not know who she spoke to, or if anyone still listened, "Is it over?" But the wind carried no answer, and deep in the soil beneath her feet something faint stirred, as if the story was not finished, as if some part of the house still breathed, waiting for a new night, a new visitor, a new soul. The night grew colder as Lila stood near the scarred ground, her breath rising like thin smoke in the air, even though the creature had vanished. She felt its presence lingering around her like a fading echo. The wind brushed past her ears, carrying faint whispers that slid across her skin, sending shivers down her spine. She wanted to believe everything was over, yet the earth beneath her feet pulsed once, as if something deep underground moved in its sleep. She stepped back slowly, her heart beat loud in her chest. The moon cast a pale light across the ruined land, revealing broken roots curling upward like twisted fingers. The soil rippled as if exhaling, and Lila froze, terrified that the house or whatever lived beneath it might start rebuilding itself piece by piece. She whispered to herself that she needed to leave, go far away, but fear held her in place, refusing to loosen its grip. A soft sound rose from the earth, a faint, distant thumping like a weak heartbeat, far away but still alive. The ground trembled lightly, dust shifting across the broken soil. Lila fell to her knees, unable to look away. The heartbeat grew stronger, steady and slow, like something gathering strength, something preparing to awaken again. She backed away, dragging herself until she reached the old fence at the edge of the property. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket, the sudden vibration slicing through the silence. She pulled it out, her hand shaking. The screen flickered, glitching with static lines before forming an image she had not taken. An image she had never seen, a photograph of the pit, glowing red, with 3 figures standing inside: Ethan, Marco, and Jessa, their hollow eyes staring up at her, their mouths open wide and silent. Scream shadows twisting behind them like chains, holding them down. The phone buzzed again, showing another image, this time a close-up of her own face taken from behind, as if someone or something had been watching her in the darkness. Her breath stopped, cold fear crawling up her spine. The phone buzzed again and again, each new photo more twisted. Her face distorted, her body stretched, her shadow bending in ways no human shadow should move. She threw the phone onto the grass, but it lit up one more time, the screen showing a message in rough, shaking letters: "You did not finish." The ground beneath her jolted hard, the heartbeat rising louder, faster, more alive than before. Cracks spread across the soil, glowing, faint red light leaking from the ground like blood seeping through bandages. The air heated, the wind died, the night held its breath. The earth split open with a deep growl, sending chunks of dirt flying into the air. Lila screamed, stumbling backward as a massive shadow rose from the pit, swirling and expanding like a storm born from the earth itself. The shadow twisted upward, forming a towering shape larger than any creature she had seen, even larger than the one that protected her. Its form unstable, constantly shifting, its limbs stretching into long black tendrils, its head splitting and reforming as if searching for the right shape. The sound of thousands of whispers grew louder, rising into a maddening chorus, each voice calling her name over and over, calling her to return to the darkness, to finish what had been started. The creature of shadow slammed one massive tendril into the ground, sending a shockwave through the entire hill. The trees shook violently, their branches bending toward the pit as if drawn by some invisible force. The air thickened, her lungs struggling to pull in even a single breath. The wind spiraled around her, tugging her closer to the edge of the glowing crack. The earth beneath her feet began to tilt, pulling her toward the rising shadow. Lila tried to run, but the ground sucked at her shoes, gripping her like the hands of the dead. She screamed again, reaching for anything to hold on to: a broken fence post, a rock, the grass itself, but the force pulling her was too strong. The towering shadow leaned toward her, its face forming into a twisted version of her own features, hollow and broken, whispering with her own voice, "Come back home." A flash of silver blue light burst across the night, the same sacred color she had seen before. The shadow recoiled, hissing in pain. The ground trembled, and the sky seemed to flicker. Lila turned toward the forest, her eyes widening. The giant creature had returned, its form dimmer, weaker, but still burning with ancient power, and it was running toward her. The battle was not over. The nightmare was not done, and the house beneath the earth still breathed. The storm faded, but the house did not grow quiet. Instead, it released a long, trembling sigh like a creature waking from sleep. The walls shifted and the floor softened under Alex's feet as if the house itself was breathing. The red glowing doorway at the top of the stairs pulsed like a beating heart, and the voices of the trapped souls rose in a desperate whisper begging Alex not to leave them behind. Alex stepped forward, holding the ancient key that Maya had dropped before she vanished. The key felt hot, like it carried the pain of everyone who had suffered here. Alex climbed the stairs, and each step bent and moaned as if trying to pull him down. He reached the red doorway, and the air turned heavy and thick. A shadow shaped like a man stood inside the room, the same figure that had chased them since the night they arrived. It turned slowly, its face smooth, empty, waiting. Alex raised the key, and the room roared with wind. Chair legs scraped across the floor, doors slammed, and the shadow rushed forward. Like a wave of darkness, Alex felt it push against him, cold, sharp, full of rage, but he pushed the key into the center of the floor where the burned circle glowed. The house screamed as if its heart had been stabbed. The floor cracked open with blinding white light, and the shadow tore apart into drifting ash. The trapped spirits lifted from the walls, their forms soft and trembling. They floated around Alex, whispering, "Thank you," before rising into the light. The entire house shook, beams snapping, windows shattering. Alex ran down the stairs as the walls curled inward like the house was collapsing into itself. He burst through the front door just as the entire building folded and disappeared into a single spark that flashed once, then went silent, leaving nothing but grass and cold night air. Alex dropped to his knees, breathing hard. The house was gone, the curse was gone, and for the first time in decades, the land was quiet. A soft wind blew across the field, carrying nothing but peace. Alex looked at the empty space where the house once stood and whispered a single promise, that no one would ever suffer here again. The nightmare ended, and the house that fed on fear died, with its secrets forever buried in the dark soil of the lonely American countryside.